Hello, my name is Lucas, this is a bit of lit, and I'm going to very briefly talk about chapter 5 of A Portrait of the Artist as Young Man, only briefly because I missed the date I was supposed to talk about it, and Noah posted an excellent discussion from everyone who reads it must converse about chapter 5. Very intelligent, erudite discussion about the merits that you can find and some of the flaws, namely the pretentiousness. There's nothing else I can really add to that because it's just really, really thorough, excellent, a little bit more praising than I would give it. So I'm going to talk about some of the faults that I have with this chapter. And if you want to know what actually happened, I will link to Noah's video because, I mean, he said everything that needs to be said. So go watch that video, come back here, and listen to reason about this chapter, yeah? No, Noah is, he makes some excellent points, so I'm just teasing. I'm not a fan of this book, mostly because of this chapter. There are some interesting points about it. It comes right after Stephen has his epiphany that he's not going to take part in the in having his life be part of the church. And in this, you know, he seems to be breaking ties with a lot of things and breaking free of his shackles of his former self, I guess, if you want to put it that way, or you know, shedding his shell, becoming his own man, that kind of thing. That's the way I read it, because he's now realizing, oh, I want to be an artist. I want to change my mother nation. Anyway, there's a lot of interesting things going on here. The reason I don't like this chapter is because it's like the epitome of his of James's cleverness and his pride in his cleverness and his own wit. And there's 2 points that I want to talk about in particular. I actually don't mind the Bildungsroman aspect of it, even though it very closely follows James's life, and I don't really like autobiographical fiction, even though there are situations where Stephen makes a different choice than James did in reality. It's still very autobiographical, but it's fictionalized, and I can't stand that. Anyway, there is this huge discussion about art and aesthetics and drama and emotion and all this stuff. Let's read a little quote here that the tragic emotion, in fact, is a face looking 2 ways, towards terror and towards pity, both of which are phases of it. You see, I use the word arrest. I mean that the tragic emotion is static, or rather the dramatic emotion is. The feelings excited by improper art are kinetic, desire or loathing. Desire urges us to possess, to go to something. Loathing urges us to abandon, to go from something. The arts which excite them, pornographical or didactic, are therefore improper arts. The aesthetic emotion, I use the general term, is therefore static. The mind is arrested and raised above desire and loathing. You say that art must not excite desire, said Lynch. I told you that one day I wrote my name in pencil on the backside of the Venus of Praxiteles in the museum. Was that not desire? I speak of normal natures, said Stephen. You also told me that when you were a boy in that charming Carmelite school, you ate pieces of dried cow dung. Anyway, kids laugh and all this other stuff. This kind of thing goes on forever. And, you know, it's Stephen's view on aesthetics and art and literature and all these kinds of things. But you have not answered my question, said Lynch. What is art? What is the beauty it expresses? That was the first definition I gave you, you sleepy-headed wretch, said Stephen. When I began to try to think out the matter for myself, do you remember the night Cranley lost his temper and began to talk about Wicklow bacon? I remember, said Lynch. He told us about them flaming fat devils of pigs. Art, said Stephen, is the human disposition of sensible or intelligible matter for an aesthetic end. You remember the pigs and forget that. You are a distressing pair, you and Cranley. But what is beauty? Much later, asked Lynch impatiently. Out with another definition. Something we see and like. Is that the best you and Aquinas can do? Let us take woman, said Stephen. Let us take her, said Lynch fervently. And I had a laugh about this because I was thinking, no, that's illegal. Obviously, he doesn't mean that. But anyway, it's not funny. So I don't know why. The Greek, the Turk, the Chinese, the Copt, and Hottentot, said Stephen, all admire a different type of female beauty, which is interesting to think about in a way. I was reading, I think, in the history of white people, maybe it was the Greeks or the Romans, that, or maybe it was another book, I don't know. Maybe I was watching a TV show or something about art, or maybe it was, what's that French movie? A Portrait of a Lady on Fire, I think, where the woman is a painter, and she's not allowed to paint the nude male because it's seen as improper. If I remember right, it's because, like, nude male is, like, the highest aesthetic of art or something. I don't remember if I saw that kind of discussion in A Portrait of a Lady on Fire, or if it was in the history of white people. But I do wonder when. I'm assuming that must be true, because I feel like I actually saw it in both of them, in different ways. When did it change from the nude male being... I mean, there are nude females from long ago in statues and different art, obviously, from long ago, but when did that change? If it did change ever, or has it always been that way, or is it a misunderstanding or a misinterpretation, or just an interpretation of the aesthetics of art from those writers or film directors or what have you? Anyway, that's what that part makes me think of when he says, let us take woman, to discuss beauty and art and all that stuff. About the history of the perception of art. So, you know, there are reasons to enjoy this book. It made me start thinking about other things. Anyway. The Greek, the Turk, the Chinese, and the Copt and the Hottentot, said Stephen, all admire a different type of female beauty. That seems to be a maze out of which we cannot escape. I see, however, two ways out. One is this hypothesis, that every physical quality admired by men and women is in direct connection with the manifold functions of women for the propagation of the species. It may be so. The world, it seems, is drearier than even you, Lynch, imagined. For my part, I dislike that way out. It leads to eugenics rather than to aesthetic. So, you know, that would be Stephen's point of view, and I was so angry at, not so much what Stephen said, but the fact that this kind of conversation just keeps going on and on and on, and it goes on from there, and it goes on well before I started quoting. I was so angry that I couldn't even write my notes properly. I wrote, "Dar hard, I hate this book." Dear God, I hate this book. Anyway. And, you know, it talks about the origin of species and blah, blah, blah. The rest of it doesn't really matter to me because I feel like this whole conversation could have been an essay. And this whole thing could have been excised. I understand it's, like, important because he's an artist and maybe we should know his disposition on art. It really doesn't matter what Stephen is saying or what James is saying through Stephen, or whether James agrees with what he's having Stephen say as the author, to me anyway, because this whole thing does not work for fiction. It is what ruins this book. The pretentiousness is bad enough, I can live with it. I didn't mind it in the first 4 chapters. I didn't mind it in the middle of this chapter or the very beginning of this chapter. But this whole conversation about aesthetics and art, it does not work in fiction. It should have been excised, separated, and made into its own thing, its own piece of writing as an essay. And, you know, I mean, like, think of it like this, right? It could still be this kind of dialogue thing. Plato wrote dialogues. Philosophy is boring to read. Plato is okay. I actually don't mind reading Plato. It's not great to read, but there it is. That's what this could have been. Instead of jamming it in here and just laying down the law on what art and aesthetics and beauty are. I don't care, okay? I mean, some of it can be in here. It doesn't need to be this long. It's distracting and removed me completely from the story because it does not work in fiction. And I'm trying to make the case for it to be a non-fiction thing, even though it uses some fictional characters or fictionalized characters in the similar way that Plato does. It could be its own, like, proper essay, I guess. Not like a dialogue like Plato, but just a regular kind of essay on aesthetics and art and beauty and all that stuff that Stephen or James goes into here. And if you think that it wouldn't work that way, well, then it just doesn't work at all, because it doesn't work in fiction. And if it's not going to work as an essay, I mean, there might be contentious points. That's different. But if it's not going to work as an essay, right, then it doesn't work at all. And it shouldn't be there. And it shouldn't have been written, but it is, because James is pretentious. I think it could have been fine if it was an essay. But if you think that it could, I just think, I don't understand. Just because a book has a lot to say doesn't mean that it's a good book. Obviously, of course, or that it's a good book for thinking about, because there are parts like this that might be better served in a different format, in my opinion. This whole essay conversation thing, or this whole conversation, it could have been fine if it was its own thing. Or if it was its own short story, you know. I would have actually been annoyed by it, because I would have thought, this is pretentious. But I wouldn't have thought, what is this doing? Actually, if it was a short story, it would be fiction. But it wouldn't be at the... I think you get my point. It drives me insane, because this whole conversation does not work at all. And it makes the story that much worse. And even though it has a lot of interesting things, a lot of techniques that James uses craftily and intelligently and cleverly, he's proud of himself. And then he goes on to do that, to lay down the law. And it's just so obnoxious. And I really can't stand it. And it should have been an essay. And if it wouldn't work as an essay, you know, if it was an essay, if I saw it as an essay and I still didn't like it, then I would just say it doesn't work. But that's my opinion. I am just repeating myself because I'm looking for the final. There we go. Now, the other part that annoys me, because after the conversation, I started to sort of enjoy it again, and I was like, okay, I see your tricks, but I'm okay with them, because there's some more allusions, a lot more fancy Latin and all that kind of good stuff. And then there is the end with these diary entry things or letters or whatever. April 16th. Away, away! The spell of arms and voices, the white arms of roads, their promise of close embraces, and the black arms of tall ships that stand against the moon, their tale of distant nations. They are held out to say, we are alone, come, and the voices say with them, we are your kinsmen, and the air is thick with their company as they call to me. their kinsmen making ready to go, shaking the wings of their exultant and terrible youth. Okay, that one's fine. Oh, there we go. April 26th. Mother is putting my new second-hand clothes in order. She prays now, she says, that I may learn in my own life, and away from home and friends, what the heart is and what it feels. Amen. So be it. Welcome, O life. I go to encounter for the millionth time the reality of experience, and to forge in the smithy of my soul the uncreated conscience of my race. Now for a little bit of a literary allusion that we already know from his last name, Daedalus. April 27th, which is my birthday, by the way. And it has been ruined permanently by James Joyce, just so you know. I think... Old father, old artificer, stand me now and ever in good stead. I just hate this book. There's a lot of pretentious things going on. I go to encounter for the millionth time the reality of experience, which is just a terrible phrase, the reality of experience. Who writes that crap? Before that is fine. And to forge in the smithy of my soul. Okay, you're being overly poetic, annoying, but fine. I can tolerate that. The uncreated conscience of my race. Get over yourself. Get over yourself. Okay? You are very intelligent, we know. Sadly, you are part of the literary canon, James. Why am I yelling at a dead man? Who writes this crap? That whole sentence was annoying or just bad writing. The reality of experience. What kind of phrase is that? To forge in the smithy of my soul. It's very poetic, but it's obnoxious, okay? After everything we've already read, and especially that conversation, which is what makes me the angriest, even though I'm having more of an emotional reaction. This was like the cherry on top that just... I threw my Kindle away when I read that part. The uncreated conscience. Where do you get off, buddy? Of my race, of the Irish nation. I assume he's not talking about white people. I assume he's talking about Ireland. He must be talking about Ireland. And, you know, I am not Irish. But just go away, okay? Stay in Paris. Never return. I know he's long gone. But I just... It's so arrogant. I mean, there's a lot of interesting things with the politics and the religion and the school system and just other cultural things. It is interesting to see an early 20th century Dublin. I think that is a really great part of the book. But, oh my God. I hate every single part of the very end. The last two sentences drive me up the wall, and it makes me hate April 27th, which is my birthday, which is an excellent day, by the way. Old father, old artificer, Daedalus, stand me now and ever in good stead. Let's see, what was my note for this crap? F this book. Yeah? Okay? Because, the uncreated conscience of my race. Are you kidding me? I'm sure there is a long history of great things, okay? Of intellectual, highly artistic, great high cultural things, and low culture, you know, no culture is all high culture, from his race, as he says. I don't know a lot about Ireland or the Irish race. I know it's had a lot of issues. But it's just so arrogant to believe that, you know, it's kind of like, it's just so insulting to the Irish, I guess, that, oh, no one has ever done anything with this scrap heap, and I've exposed all the issues of his time, for all its ugly faults. And it's just because they have no conscience. There's nothing there. No, you know, no morality or anything. It's just a terrible, awful place. And, you know, if you read this book, Ireland is kind of sketchy. And I'm not saying in its history it hasn't been, or it hasn't had sketchy moments, you know, with the British or with the Catholic Church or, you know, what have you, with the school systems, all that kind of stuff. But I go to encounter for the millionth time the reality of experience, and to forge in the smithy of my soul the uncreated conscience of my race. Just go to hell, okay? Go back to chapter 3 and stay there. Yeah? Cool. Old father, old artificer. Daedalus, yeah, the artificer, created the wax wings, created the labyrinth, is going to be his muse, his father, to create this great work of art, because he will be an artist who has all these ideas on aesthetics and art and beauty and what a conscience is, a created conscience. Because remember, Stephen's race, James's race, or Stephen's race, yeah, because Stephen is Irish. They have an uncreated conscience. They're barbarians, essentially. Now, maybe annotations will tell me how wrong I am. About what that actually means. You know, and Noah had his own thing to say. And I'm sure that Crypto and Una will have their own thing to say about it. Again, I did not read this with any annotations, so I don't know if there's something special to this, but, you know, stand me now and ever in good stead when I say, F this book. Hello, again. Just as an addendum, or an amendment, I guess, to what I was saying. If you want to read a book that is about changing the what was that god-awful term? The uncreated conscience of my race. Read Lu Xun. He's a Chinese author who was around during the Qing Dynasty, and after that, early 20th century writer from China, and he wanted to become a doctor because his father died of cancer, and he tried traditional medicines from China, and those didn't work, and he saw that his country and all its institutions, education, health, governmental, all these different things were failing the people, so he wanted to become a doctor, in particular because of what happened to his father, so he went to study in Japan. And anyway, while he was there, he realized that I can heal my people, the Chinese people, better if I change their minds rather than fix their bodies. And so he became a writer, and he has a lot of really excellent, sharp, poignant, scathing short stories that point out all the ills of Qing Dynasty China, and a little bit beyond that too, when it was like a bunch of warlords fighting with each other before the Communist Party came into power, which actually Mao really loved his writing and co-opted it, even though to be part of the tradition. He's very famous and well revered. There's actually well revered in China. He's taught here. There's actually in Shanghai, there's a park with a museum for him. It's very cool. I will show that off sometime. Really excellent writer. And yeah, much better for what he's trying to do, and not, you know, even though he has the same sort of stated agenda with his authorship, not arrogant in any way. Yeah, unlike James Joyce, who, might I say, was very garbagely, trashily poetic. Garbagely is not a word, but that's what he's done to me. Welcome, O life! I go to encounter for the millionth time the reality of experience, and to forge in the smithy of my soul the uncreated conscience of my garbage. Because that's what this book is, yeah? Old father, old artificer, stand me now and ever in good garbage. Yeah? Okay, thank you, goodbye.